"Miss you!" exclaimed Molly. "I should think I would. Judy, you wretch!" "I never did say she wasn't coming," replied Judy. "I simply said, 'Is it possible you haven't heard the news about Nance?' It shows how your heart rules your head, Molly. You shouldn't take on so until you get at the real truth. Your impetuous nature needs—" Here Judy was interrupted by the noise of a headlong rush down the hall. Then the door was burst open and 3 girls blew into the room, all laughing and talking at once. "My goodness, it sounds like a stampede of wild cattle," exclaimed Judy. "How are you, old pals?" A general all-round embrace followed. It was Margaret Wakefield, last year's class president, her chum Jessie Lynch, and Sallie Marks, now a senior, but not in the least set up by her exalted state. "Where's Mabel Hinton?" some one demanded. "She's moved over to the Quadrangle into a singleton. She wanted to be nearer the scene of action," she said, "and Queen's was too diverting for her serious life's work," so Margaret explained. "I'm sorry," said Molly. "I'm one of those nice comfortable home bodies that likes the family to keep right on just the same forever. But I suppose we can't expect everybody to be as fond of this old brown house as we are. Sit down, everybody," she added hospitably. "And oh, yes, wait a moment. I didn't open this on the train at all." She fell on her knees and opened her suitcase while her friends exchanged knowing smiles. "Ruling passion, even strong in death," observed Judy. "Of course it's something good to eat," laughed pretty Jessie. "Of course," replied Molly, pitching articles of clothing out of her satchel with all the carelessness of one who pursues a single idea at a time. "And why not? My sister made them for me the morning I left and packed them carefully in a tin box with oiled paper." "Cloudbursts!" they cried ecstatically and pounced on the box without ceremony, while Molly, who, like most good cooks, had a small appetite, leaned back in a Morris chair and regarded them with the pleased satisfaction of a host who has provided satisfactory refreshment for his guests. The summer had made few changes in the faces of her last year's friends. Margaret was a bit taller and more massive, and her handsome face a little heavier. Already her youthful lines were maturing and she might easily have been mistaken for a senior. Nance was as round and plump as a partridge, and there was a new happiness in her face, the happiness of returning to the first place she had ever known that in any way resembled a home. Nance had lived in a boarding house ever since she could remember, but Queen's was not like a boarding house, at least not like the one to which she was accustomed, where the boarders consisted of 2 crusty old bachelors, a widow who was hipped about her health and always talked symptoms, a spinster who had taught school for 30 years, and Nance's parents, that is, one of them, and at intervals the other. Mrs. Oldham only returned to her family to rest between club conventions and lecture tours. Judy had a beautiful creamy tan on her face, which went admirably with her dreamy gray eyes and soft light brown hair. There were times when she looked much like a boy, and she did at this moment, Molly thought, with her hair parted on one side and a brilliant Roman scarf knotted around her rolling Byronic collar. Jessie, just now engaged in the pleasing occupation of smiling at her own image in the mirror over the mantel, was as pretty as ever. As for Sallie Marks, every familiar freckle was in its familiar place, and, as Judy remarked later, she had changed neither her spots nor her skin. She had merely added a pair of eyeglasses to her tip-tilted critical nose, and there was, perhaps, an extra spark of dry humor in her pale eyes. Molly was a little thin. She always fell off after a 98 in the shade summer, but she was the same old Molly to her friends, possessed with an indescribable charm and sweetness. The nameless charm, it had been called, but there were many who could name it as being a certain kindly gentleness and unselfishness. "What's the news, girls?" she demanded, giving a general all-round smile like that of a famous orator, which seemed to be meant for everybody at once and no one in particular. "News is scarce, or should I say are," replied Margaret. "Epiménides Antinous Green, the handsomest man ever seen, was offered a chair in one of the big colleges and refused." "But why?" cried Molly, round-eyed with amazement. "Because he has more liberty at Wellington and more time to devote to his writings." Molly walked over to the window to hide a smile. "The comic opera," she thought. "He's just published a book, you know, on the Elizabethan drama," went on Margaret, "which is to be used as a text book in lots of private schools. And he's been on a walking trip through England."